What a play by the Hawks!
2 points ain't 2 points. That's a lot.
Both teams play hard. God bless and good night.
The undermanned Toronto Raptors go into Atlanta and lose an absolute heartbreaker in overtime, 124-122. We're going to talk about Scottie Barnes' huge night, Malachi Flynn's breakout performance, OG Anunoby and Thaddeus Young steadying everything up, Christian Koloko gobbling up rebounds, and we're going to talk about the bad part, in which AJ Griffin finds himself underneath the basket for a wide open layup. How did it happen? Who was at fault? What can the Raptors do to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen again? If you're new around here, my name is Robert. This is Pensari Basketball. Make sure to hit like, subscribe if you haven't already, grab your coffee, and let's get to it. So my first key takeaway is, what a night by Scottie Barnes. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. 29 shots to get 28 points is no one's idea of efficient. But if you actually watched the game, you saw a dialed in, assertive, absolutely aggressive Scottie Barnes. And this is what Raptor fans and I guess Nick Nurse have been calling for months now, which is don't be passive, don't look for teammates. Scottie did both. This was a very in the flow 29 attempts. There were about 2 shots tonight where I could count where I'd be like, I don't know if that's a good shot. But to take 27 positive shots, it's incredible. This was a dominant night. If you're watching the passes right tonight, this is what I've been talking about for what feels like 2 years now with Scottie, which is that when his scoring hits a level where you have to throw a double team at him, and I think it's getting there very slowly, you can't stop this guy. Because you can't stop him with a double team. There are certain players like this, like LeBron. You can't stop LeBron with a double team. He will pick you apart. Luka, you can't stop Luka with a double team. When a generational passer becomes a dominant scorer, it is basically a hallmark for massive playoff success for the team that holds that player. And you can look through the history of the NBA. There is not one example to the contrary. Generational passers do not grow on trees. There might be one in every single draft, and Scottie Barnes was that guy. Yes, some people think that Cade's a really good passer, Suggs is a really good passer. They're not. Not at this level. There are levels to this. Okay, when we talk about great passers, it's not about 10 assists, it's not about 18 assists, it's not about, averaging a triple-double. That's not the point here. The point is, where do you find advantages? How quickly are you throwing those passes? How on target are they? What is your dexterity? Can you throw it left-handed, right-handed? Can you throw it over the top? Can you throw it under? How soon are you registering the advantage for your team? Scottie Barnes is a generational passer. There are other generational passers in the NBA. Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Chris Paul. There are very few players like this. When you start to get into a position where you can't stop this guy one-on-one, and believe me, like his strength in the post, this range of hook shots and flick shots that he has near the basket, the physical profile of a guy with a 7'3.5", 7'4" wingspan, the strength, the athleticism, the quickness, the developing handle, which I really don't think is getting enough credit, the shot that is starting to open up the paint. My gosh, man, those long strides. Are you seeing what is coming? Because if you're not, I suggest you check your eyes. This is what he showed tonight is something that maybe in the last 20 years, there has been this type of performance from a 21-year-old 15 times, maybe. It's special. It's very special. It wasn't perfect. The ankle goes down in the fourth with that ankle injury, holding it, hops to the bench, plops down, heart sinks. If you were watching the money line, it literally flipped for the Hawks the minute he went down. That's how important he was. Odds makers know, Vegas knows. And the second he went down, the Hawks completely flipped this game over. And by the time he came back, they were feeling way too good about themselves for the Raptors to do anything. Despite this, the Raptors had yet another shot. And we're going to get into that in the final takeaway of game management and what went wrong down the stretch. So positive night for Scottie Barnes. Overall, very good night. I hope that ankle is not damaged. It looked really bad the way that he landed. That is his other ankle. So if you're doing the math, that's now both ankles that have been hurt in the last 2 weeks. So this is getting to be kind of scary, and I'm really happy that he's going to have 3 days off. To the next point, Nick Nurse is going to have to learn to trust someone else. Now, this is not going to be me trashing Fred VanVleet for having a 4 for 18 performance, and I'm sure that some of you who are watching this video are very much expecting me to go in that direction. I'm not going to go in that direction. I actually don't think Fred VanVleet played a really bad game. He missed a lot of shots, yes, but he had some very, very encouraging and good stretches in this game. That is not the point. The point here is a dynamic that has developed between Nick Nurse and Fred VanVleet. And I want to draw this parallel to something that is happening currently in Golden State with Klay Thompson. So, as some of you know, I have been on my soapbox about this. Fred VanVleet is basically a shorter Klay Thompson. Well, this season, Klay Thompson has taken a major step back. So now, Klay Thompson has basically turned into a taller Fred VanVleet. And it is killing, absolutely killing the Golden State offense and defense, frankly. He insists on taking matchups because of ego. He's taking shots that, frankly, are coming at the expense of better teammates who are just shooting a lot better than him right now. And one of my favorite YouTubers, Athletic Alchemy, shout out Athletic Alchemy, did a nice video breakdown on how Klay needs to take a step back. But because his relationship with Steph Curry, Steve Kerr, is too strong, no one is willing to confront him and say, hey bro, maybe you need to take a step back for the better of the team. The Raptors have gone through some very, very ugly stretches with Fred VanVleet. Now the overall picture for Fred is great. Fred has been a really good player. He takes way too much shit about his defense. I think it is severely underrated. Had this debate yesterday about Fred VanVleet and his impact on defense. And look, if you're just watching the guy play defense, you probably don't get it, right? You probably don't see it. You probably thinking, oh, this guy's giving up blow-bys. He's not very big. He's not very long. The contests are sometimes a little bit short. He gets caught up in the post. But I'm telling you, as someone who studies basketball very deeply, Fred VanVleet is a very good defender. Not a great defender. Not a perfect defender. He's not Gary Payton. He's not Gary Payton's son, but he's very good. But when he goes through these shooting spells, it does tend to tank the offense quite a bit. Tonight he was minus 16, which is the worst on the team. And this has happened a couple times for Fred so far. I think his playmaking was very encouraging. I saw Fred VanVleet set a pick for Scottie Barnes. I don't think I saw that all last year. That is very encouraging. The fact that he was able to let go and just say, tonight is not my night, Scottie, you take it, I think was just huge. I think the Raptors overall tonight played incredibly well. Result notwithstanding, I think they grinded hard on defense. I think there were a few moments. If you wipe out maybe 3 minutes of this game, this is probably a blowout. It just so happens that Fred VanVleet was on the court for those 3 minutes, right? And that's where your negative 16 comes from. But I do want to say that Malachi Flynn looked incredible tonight. And for those of you who, like me, have believed for a very long time that Malachi Flynn's potential, top-end potential, is probably about as good, if not better, than Fred VanVleet, there are certain things that Malachi can do that absolutely shred the other team that Fred simply doesn't do very well. And I think that he's a very underrated defender as well. So there are moments where going with the hot hand would help. But like with Klay and Golden State, it seems that nobody is willing to really say, hey bro, you need to sit on the bench right now. The NBA is a business. 2 times in the playoffs, both times against Philly, Fred VanVleet had nightmare series. When I say nightmare, I do mean nightmare. Now, overall, Fred VanVleet is not a good playoff performer. His finals run against Steph Curry gets a lot of credit, and credit due. But I encourage you to go and check the shooting performance of Steph Curry in that series. It wasn't as bad as you would think. The problem is not these cold stretches. Every player has cold stretches. The problem is, this is not a player who really steps back very much in those cold stretches. Tends to shoot himself out of those cold stretches. Against the Philadelphia 76ers in 2018-2019, that resulted in 4 for 24, a brutal series in which longer defenders made Fred VanVleet's life a living hell. Last year, against the Philadelphia 76ers, you saw that the series absolutely flipped when Fred VanVleet eventually gave out and left. Are the Raptors better without Fred VanVleet? No, I don't believe they are. But the Raptors would be better if Nick Nurse was willing to hold Fred VanVleet as accountable as he holds the rest of the roster. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for trade Fred VanVleet. I'm not saying bench Fred VanVleet. I am, however, saying that someone on this team has to be able to have a conversation with this guy when he's having one of these 3 for 20, 4 for 18, 1 for 12 performances and just say, hey, bro, you need to step back. The problem, however, is that he is your captain. He's your leader. And he's gunning for a new contract, which he has not gotten yet. Benching him in the fourth quarter is a very bad look. Playing him exclusively where he should be played, which is as a shooting guard, probably is a really bad look. It's not going to help him get more dollars if instead of entering the next offseason with, hey, I'm a all-star, 6-foot, undersized, 29-year-old point guard who just averaged 20 points and started every single game at point guard. That's a very different contract negotiation than I am now a role-playing secondary initiator who averaged 14 points per game and sometimes, due to matchups, spent the fourth quarter on the bench. The difference between the contract that player A and player B get is probably like $50 million. So the question is Nick Nurse going to take $50 million out of Fred VanVleet's pocket because it helps the team to play a little bit bigger? Is Nick Nurse going to ask Fred VanVleet to take a step back on offense on one of those really tough nights if it results in Fred VanVleet maybe averaging 12, 13 points per game this season? These are questions that are worth asking. The Raptors do have a lot of players who are gunning for new contracts. Some of those players are gunning for those new contracts within the framework of the team. Some of them are not. I'm not going to have to tell you which ones are and which ones are not. I hope that you can figure that out from context and what I've been talking about for the last 2 months. The NBA is a business. I get that. I absolutely understand that there are serious implications to benching a guy in the fourth quarter who is seen as your all-star, your leader, your captain. That's a story. That's a scandal. And the Toronto media would not ever let that slide. If Fred VanVleet, due to an injury, like in the Philly series, was benched, was asked to come off the bench for a temporary period of time because Tyrese Maxey and James Harden were absolutely giving him fits, what are the optics? The story writes itself. Undersized guard can't hang. Now, every undersized point guard knows that there is a bias towards undersized players being defensive liabilities. There's always been that. And so my heart, from a very honest perspective, goes out to Fred VanVleet because he is not a defensive liability. And he is a hell of a player. And he is a very good player. And I think that any team in the league would be better off on most nights having Fred VanVleet. However, he is 6 feet tall. He is a defensive liability in certain situations. And when you get into the playoffs, I guarantee you that every single team that the Raptors do not want to face in the playoffs can shut him down pretty easily. And at that moment, Nick Nurse is going to have to decide whether he wants to win a series or help Fred VanVleet get the bag. And what has driven me absolutely mental over the last 4 years is that he has always chosen to give Freddie the shot. He has always chosen to go with him. Now, I think tonight was a step in the right direction, that when the shot was absolutely not going, the Raptors veered away from Fred and more or less went to OG almost every possession down the stretch, and I think that was a good idea. And OG did really well. Scottie Barnes, prior to the ankle, played really well. So Fred VanVleet was effectively third option tonight, but 4 for 18. This comes on the heels of a terrible shooting performance the last game as well. And this comes in the same season as his 0 for 11. The shooting percentage is tanking. This also, by the way, comes after the playoffs last year, where he was an absolute disaster due to injury, yes. But I don't think people have given Scottie the same leeway with his ankle injury. So If we're going to hold Scottie Barnes, a 20-year-old and 21-year-old second-year player, accountable for his defense and his defensive abilities and effort when he's battling through an ankle, then I think that it's okay to hold Fred VanVleet accountable. In the playoffs, he was really bad, offensively and defensively. For the second half of last season, he was extremely inefficient. Not bad, inefficient. Still an above-average starter, but not an all-star. Not an all-NBA player. Not a guy that should have free reign and carte blanche in your offense to either create or shoot. I'll tell you right now that the thing that worries me most about this team going into the playoffs next year, and probably will continue to worry me until I see it solved, is that there are 2 point guards on this team, one of whom is the captain, the other who is a coach. And I think that Nick Nurse and Fred VanVleet are so tied at the hips. I think that it is impossible for Nick Nurse to see objectively that someone who is as smart and as capable and as good as Fred VanVleet can, in select situations, hurt your team. I am never going to be a proponent for putting someone on the court who hurts your team. If Scottie Barnes cannot shoot and you need a 3, maybe Scottie Barnes needs to sit on the bench. That's fair. That's okay. And if you are facing a team full of long defenders, maybe Fred VanVleet doesn't take 18 shots that day. Maybe Fred VanVleet doesn't ISO one-on-one against DeAndre Hunter and DeJounte Murray, both of whom are basically all-league defenders in terms of caliber. Just saying. So my third key takeaway is that this was a hell of a performance, and this was a gut check performance. And if you're a Raptor fan, you should be really proud of this team. They laid it on the line. They played like a team. There were moments in that second quarter where I was smiling from ear to ear. I couldn't believe how unselfishly this team was playing, how clean those open looks were. The Raptors really did generate good looks tonight. The offense looked really smooth, and frankly, I have always believed that this is what happens when you run your offense through a gifted passer, that things can smooth out. Obviously, in the absence of one of these heliocentric hubs like Luka, LeBron, etc., who do tend to elevate your offense to top 10 levels, you should probably have a team concept in place, right? The Chicago Bulls, apart from Pippen, who was very good as a passer, Kukoc was all right as well, but I don't think the Chicago Bulls, when they were winning all those championships, had a gifted passer. They didn't have a Scottie Barnes at all, okay? Jordan was a good passer. He wasn't a gifted passer. The Lakers, when they were winning their championships, Shaq was a very good passer, very underrated. Ron Harper was all right. Kobe was all right. None of these guys are gifted passers. They're good passers. They're not gifted passers. So you have the triangle, and it works, right? The scheme offsets the ability. That's what schemes are supposed to do. If you have a big who can't switch, you have to create a scheme that can hide him. If you have an undersized point guard at the point of attack, you have to have schemes that help him. That's what schemes are designed to do. That's what coaches, good coaches, are paid to do, is to put their players in a system and through schemes that elevate them. I'm reminded of Wilt Chamberlain, the Big Dipper. And I'm reminded that Wilt was a career loser for a very long period of time. And that despite his offensive heroics, averaging 50 points per game and all sorts of things, and we're not going to get into pace and all the adjustments. And if you're smart, if you understand math, you understand that Wilt's stats are massively overstated. He is not a top 5 player of all time, and don't even get me started on it. And I loved Wilt Chamberlain, but not a top 5 player. But you will notice that in those years with the Lakers, where he was asked to play more like Russell, that the team offense elevated so drastically. Because Wilt was a very good passer, just completely unwilling. He led the league in assists one year. Imagine that. The guy who scored 100 points also led the league in assists. But you know what happened to the team offense when he led the league in assists? It elevated. Scoring options who become willing passers lead to decent offense. Running your offense through Chris Bosh is going to be a disaster. The Raptors know that, right? because he's not a willing or gifted passer. It's neither. Turning a gifted passer into a very good scorer or a dominant scorer, like at least Rasheed Wallace in the post, Chris Webber level scorer, that is a hallmark for, that is a recipe for a top 10 offense. The Toronto Raptors would be very wise, in my opinion, to run their offense as much as possible through Scottie Barnes. This egalitarian point guard stuff is fine. I understand it, but it doesn't make sense. Because you have a very gifted playmaker and 5 or 6 not very gifted playmakers, capable playmakers. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Thaddeus Young, Malachi Flynn, Delano Banton, every one of these guys have shown flashes of playmaking ability for others. None of them are gifted passers. I don't care how many assists Fred racks up or Pascal racks up. They're not gifted passers. Gifted passers can do things with the ball and unlock advantages that you don't even you don't even know you have them until they see it. I'm reminded that as Wilt was dominating possessions, that while his stats were really great, his team stats sucked. Team offense suffered. I'm reminded that as Jerry Stackhouse was gunning for 30 points per game, that it was not very efficient for the Pistons. I'm also reminded of Allen Iverson. Sixers were not a great offense. They didn't actually get to the finals until they absolutely elevated their defense to record levels behind Dikembe Mutombo and a slew of defenders. We fundamentally misunderstand the game that we watch so often. We will look at a guy who scores 25 to 28 points per game, and we'll see a whole bunch of other guys who don't crack 10 points per game, and we'll say, that guy's just carrying a bunch of bums. Tonight was a loss that feels like a win. There are a handful of things that you just flip it just a little bit. The whistle was absolutely horrendous. It worked out in the Raptors' favor once when Scottie grabbed DeAndre Hunter's jersey, and I hope that you saw that. That was absolutely, it went in the Raptors' favor because that should have been 2 free throws plus possession. I believe it's 1 free throw, one and one. So the Raptors get away with 1. But for the most part, the amount of contact that they generated on some of those drives to walk away with not very many free throws was just, sometimes that's home court advantage for you. But I think that the whistle was uneven tonight. Scottie Barnes makes that layup, doesn't get injured. There's a lot of what-ifism here, right? I do, however, want to say that if they go into second overtime, I do think that they lose this game anyways. They were running on fumes. There is an absolute relationship between aggressive defense and shooting slumps. You can track it. It's provable by science and math. There's a reason why guys like Tyrese Halliburton, De'Aaron Fox, guys like this that are sort of one-way players, they're dominant offensively. You can look at their defensive box plus minus, offensive box plus minus splits. It's off the charts. There's a reason why that guys who take a massive role on defense often have tired legs on offense. And you will often see that there are players on this team that sometime around the third quarter, their shots just stop falling. They may kick it into gear in the fourth quarter, but there's just a fatigue element to this. The only way to play balls out defensively, the way the Raptors do, is to cut minutes. So I guess I've been rambling to a point where I come to my takeaway, which is that everything that the Raptors are doing now, every positive thing the Raptors did tonight, I hope that they can hold on to it for when they get healthy. And that things do not revert back to Pascal iso ball and just 4 guys standing around. Because what I saw tonight was encouraging. It was beautiful to see a team do this on the road, undermanned. It was a gutsy performance. And yet, sometimes things don't fall your way. But this was a very good game for the Raptors. I'm very proud of the performance they put together. There's some things to chew on. There's some things to think about. So the first mistake is Thaddeus Young losing Trae Young in the backcourt. Now, obviously, Trae Young is a point guard. Thaddeus Young has been a power forward since he was 20 years old. This is probably not a foot race that you're going to win if you're the Raptors. So maybe the question first should be, why was Thaddeus Young the guy who was on Trae Young? That probably was wrong. I don't like the Raptors matchup here. If you do have a backline defender in this situation, it should be Christian Koloko. I understand that OG Anunoby is your best defender, but in this situation, I do not want Christian Koloko, a rookie who is 7 feet tall, having to make decisions about Trae Young and DeJounte Murray 50 feet from the basket. So that's on Nick Nurse. The second thing, of course, Thaddeus Young gets beat. So here at 3.4 seconds, Fred VanVleet needs to step up. Because Scottie Barnes, now the second part of this equation is Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes probably shouldn't have been there. Okay? Scottie and OG should have been holding back a little bit. But because the Hawks overload in the backcourt, the Raptors fall right into the trap and then they follow them, which leaves a one-on-one between AJ Griffin and OG Anunoby in the front court. The problem is that once Trae Young breaks past your defense, your wall of defense, and really he breaks past because of Clint Capella. Clint Capella sets the pick on Scottie. Fred VanVleet does not. Like, you can see it. He's not even running at this point. This had to be on Fred VanVleet and Christian Koloko to help. So the first line of defense really was Thaddeus Young playing denial on Trae Young. Once that doesn't work and Trae Young breaks past him, you have to help Thaddeus Young. He's 34 years old, okay? And he's a power forward, being asked to guard possibly one of the quickest players in the NBA, face guarding. That's not going to work. So the next line of defense has to be Christian Koloko, Scottie Barnes, and Fred VanVleet. Someone has to stop the ball because the ball is the most important thing here. Unfortunately, Fred and Christian Koloko cannot close that gap. They don't even try to close that gap, really. Scottie Barnes gets picked off by Clint Capella. And by the 2.6 mark, this game is over, okay? Because if someone like Trae Young, who is an incredible shooter, by the way, has 2.5 seconds at the half-court mark, there is nothing that OG Anunoby can do here. Now, help the helper. I do want to say that I think OG Anunoby makes the wrong decision here. By going up to Trae Young, you absolutely leave a backdoor open to one of the most gifted passers in the NBA. Okay? There's no way in a tie game situation, this is not, oh, you're up and you can't give the three. No, this is a tie game. So a 2 could kill you, a free throw could kill you, a 3 could kill you. There's no way that OG Anunoby made the right decision here. Far be it for me to say this is OG's fault. It's not OG's fault. I do want to say, however, that this was 3, 4, 5 players, all of whom made mistakes on the same play in 3.8 seconds. If the Raptors could play this over again, the correct play, in my opinion, is for OG to play closer to the basket and to hopefully allow Christian Koloko or Scottie Barnes to recover. Now, would they recover? Possibly not. But at that point, you're still giving up a lightly contested jumper, because I'm assuming they would at least make it back into the play. Like, if we play this out, Trae Young makes this pass at 2 seconds, right? At 2.1 seconds, he makes this pass to AJ Griffin, who is wide open. That is 100% opportunity for the defense that you're giving up at the rim, okay? That should not have happened. However, if OG Anunoby decides to play AJ Griffin, Trae Young has to make a different choice, which is probably a pull-up jump shot. It could be a 3, and he could very well hit it. However, at that point, it would still have been a lower percentage shot. Even a wide open 3 for Trae Young is a lower percentage shot, despite the fact that he's a great shooter. It's a lower percentage shot than a wide open layup for AJ Griffin, which is a 99.9% outcome. So I think that this was a constant breakdown. I would love to be able to tell you that it was just one guy's fault. Yeah, Scottie probably shouldn't have pressured. Thaddeus Young probably shouldn't have been on the court guarding Trae Young. Christian Koloko probably should have closed that gap. Fred VanVleet probably should have actually tried to run back on defense. And OG Anunoby probably should have made a different decision. I'd love to tell you it's conclusively one guy's fault, but honestly, this just comes to a very smart passer exploiting a defense with a lot of holes. My final thoughts. And this is going to be pretty Scottie-centric as well. Malachi Flynn, that was impressive. That was a really impressive game. Juancho Hernangomez, I stand corrected, man. I was not a fan of that signing when it happened. I thought that they should have kept Yuta Watanabe. And yeah, Yuta is leading the league in three-point percentage, and I may look like a genius, but I don't feel like a genius for doubting this Juancho move. I think he showed a lot of positive things tonight. He is a willing passer. He knows how to play the game. He really does. When you track how he moves without the ball, there's a very, very good case to be made that he's one of your smarter players. And I think that is always encouraging. When you can bring a guy into your team who can hit shots, play just enough defense to keep himself on the court, and he's smart, I think that's a really good thing to have in a 13th, 12th guy on your bench. The Raptors cannot get healthy soon enough. They're really, really taxing the guys who are still playing. And gutsy performance for Scottie Barnes. In the last post game, he was asked if he's injured, and he just outright looked down, lied, and said, no, the ankle's not bothering me. It is absolutely bothering him, and it's continuing to bother him. And I would like the Raptors to get healthy so that Scottie Barnes doesn't have to play 42, 43, 44 minutes. Part of me just kind of wishes that we had a coach who wouldn't let him play 44 minutes. You're finding out who Scottie Barnes is, slowly. And I think what I'm seeing, and I might have blinders on because the guy is my favorite player in the NBA, but I think what you're seeing is an emerging superstar. I really do. I think the Hawks threw a lot at him tonight. There were clear sags and double teams, and he just shredded them. In transition, in the half court, we are a team that really struggles to generate offense in the half court. And I think that Scottie, in the post, Scottie as a spacer, I think he's turning himself into a very complete offensive player. I'm not going to make a separate video to discuss Scottie's struggles, but I do believe that I know what's happening with him during this season and just the struggles. Not just the ankle. Of course, the ankle has been a huge part of it, and I'm sure that he's thinking about it constantly, that if he pushes off too hard, or if he lands a little bit awkwardly, or he jumps a little too high, that he's going to come down and just break the thing. He's not the first player in NBA history who had early lower body issues or ankle issues and went on to have a Hall of Fame career. Just look at Steph Curry. It happens. Beyond what he's going through with health and durability, which is, I think, very significant, what I really think is happening with him is overload. Too much. He's added too much to his game. Now, Scottie is a super smart person. And if you've listened to him talk, or if you've seen how he processes the game, he is, if there was anyone who could take a miracle leap in an offseason, it's him. He's not the first player to try it. Very few can. There are about 80 things he did tonight, maybe 90, on both ends, offensively and defensively, that he couldn't even think about doing 17 months ago. Could not imagine doing it. Couldn't conceive of it. If you saw it from him at Florida State, if this version of Scottie Barnes goes to Florida State, and I'm telling you very honestly, he wins College Player of the Year hands down. Where he's come from where he was is mind-blowing. It is beyond comprehension. It is one of, in my opinion, one of the most interesting player development stories in NBA history. And I've seen quite a few, okay? I've seen players shift positions, change. Nicholas Batum was one of my favorite player development stories as well, you know? Interesting is not always outstanding. But what Scottie has become from what he was at Florida State, this is a guy who averaged 10 points per game in college. Off-motion threes to some of those crossovers, the handle. This is not the same player. That was 17 or 18 months ago, man. Florida State ended their season in 2021. This is 2022. We are next year, man. This is not the same player. This is... And I was a very big fan of Scottie at Montverde. I was a very big fan of the Night Riders. It was like him at AAU was so cool. But what he has become, the type of performance that he put up last year, even what we're seeing from him this year in spurts, it's insanity. David Thorpe once said that Scottie had the potential to be a predator wing, like Kawhi, like Paul George. Now, of course, unlike Kawhi, when he does develop all of the skill set to become a predator wing, he will also be bringing his generational vision and passing with it, right? That becomes a Kawhi 2.0 souped up Kawhi, right? Because in terms of generating space in the post, he has the bag. He has the full package, okay? This is just a matter of off-season development. This is a matter of footwork, pacing, repetition. It's coming. But what you can't do is you can't footwork and repetition yourself into advantages that you can't create. Scottie's wide open. He's just not hitting it. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's getting past his guy. There's just a repetition issue of the shot doesn't go in, or, he doesn't quite get his legs into it when he's fading back. But look at how open he is once he creates a move. Just look at it. Go look at the shots and see which shots are actually being contested. What looks hard for him? It felt like he could do this whenever he wants. Bully ball on the post, switch, a little three here, a corner three here, transition dunk, and boom, 22, 23 point per game scorer, like that. So all of the Michael Carter Williams, Ben Simmons stuff, that just needs to shut the hell up right now, because what this guy is flashing at age 21 is special. Now, I want to say that I'm not a clairvoyant, right? But the way I'm feeling about Scottie right now, like in terms of like the potential that he's flashing right now, is not a way that I have felt about any player outside of maybe Luka and Jason Tatum in several years now. Like over the last 5 years, those were the two players where I really honed in and I was like, wow, at 21, like, wow, they're going to be super special. Scottie's there, like right there for me. And I agree with Fred VanVleet. I wouldn't trade him for anybody. One-on-one, one-for-one, I wouldn't trade him for anybody. So, look, tonight was an awesome night. Tonight was really encouraging. I think it was a really good game. I think the Raptors played well. I think if one or two things go their way, they probably pull this out. So, a lot to be encouraged about in this young season. Once again, I will repeat it. If the Raptors end 20 games at 10-10, given the schedule they've had, the injuries they've had, this will be a monumental success. So next up, Wednesday against Brooklyn, facing off against Kyrie, KD, Ben Simmons, and hopefully the Raptors get a few bodies back. Hopefully nothing serious for Scottie Barnes' ankle. And we'll see. We'll see if Scottie can roll a couple of these performances together. We've now seen 2 positive performances in a row. AJ Griffin, I mean, look, my draft analysis is so off target. I was kind of bearish on Paolo and Ben Mathurin, so I feel like an absolute idiot. But I did get a lot of things right, too. I just feel like I got 2 very big things wrong. Well, I got 3 very big things wrong. I was bearish on Walker Kessler, which has just, he's been so good for Utah. I was bearish on Paolo. I thought Jabari was the better pick, and so far that looks like an absolutely asinine take. And I just felt like Ben Mathurin was really selfish and probably wouldn't be that great at anything but scoring, but he's actually shown a lot more, and Indiana's doing really well. So, yeah, but man, I was really high on AJ Griffin. Really high on AJ Griffin. And the one thing that I kept thinking was, I love Thaddeus Young, like a lot. But man, if AJ Griffin falls to 20, that was our pick. We would have gotten AJ Griffin. He is so good, and he's just going to continue being so good for the Hawks. I think they have their 3 of the future for sure. And if they decide to play small with DeAndre Hunter at 4, and they can just get something to help them in the middle, honestly, if I was the Hawks, here's what I would do. This is completely unsolicited, trade advice for the Hawks. Package John Collins and Clint Capella. Package those 2 guys for Rudy Gobert, who is stinking it up in Minnesota, and I guarantee you will dominate the playoffs. Because AJ Griffin should be starting for this team. I really believe that. He is such a he is a knockdown shooter. He has so much potential defensively. His stock slid largely due to injury concerns, but man, that guy should have been a top 10 pick. The Atlanta Hawks got a good one and really good young player. Nice to see, you know, like, I mean, as a Raptor connection, he is the son of Adrian Griffin, so you gotta love that. You can let me know in the comments below whether you agree with what I'm saying or not. And yeah, and also guys, we are right at 4,000 subscribers as I'm releasing this, so congratulations to our channel and our community. We are growing. 4,000 subscribers that's awesome. And by the way, if you're a fan of Thaddeus Young, please check out the last video. I think you're gonna really like it. It's like a 3.5 minute mix of his 0-point performance against the Houston Rockets. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate Thaddeus Young, and at some point this season, I really do want to make a career profile or video about him, because I just think he's so underrated. Anyway, till next time, peace.